Hi, everybody. I'm here with the miserable liberal and Ron Placone.
Howdy, howdy.
Hello.
Yay. So this happened. This happened again. So we've been telling you left and right. We just showed you the video that James O'Keefe got of the senior CNN reporter, producer, admitting that they're pushing the Russia story strictly for ratings and there's no evidence and he thinks it's all BS. They've been printing BS stories left and right, having to put editor's notes. I mean, I'm kidding. Articles as long as my arm. I mean, the list of articles as long as my arm. I can tell you that they've been printing fake stories everywhere. Washington Post, New York Times, CNN. So this is just the latest example of the mainstream news printing a completely false story that has to do with Russia. Again, we have to remind you, you know this is propaganda. Russia isn't communist. They're horrible, predatory, crony capitalists just like we are. We're worse because we're spreading it around. Anyway, so what happened was CNN, three of their top, they just organized this group of people, by the way, this group of, this investigative team. The head guy is this guy, Thomas Frank, not the Thomas Frank that wrote this book, different Thomas Frank.
I actually thought that too when I first read the article. I was like, yeah, it's not the Thomas Frank whose book we like.
So they put together, at the end of last year, they put together this investigative team. They're going to do investigative stuff, and really, they're going to be good journalism peoples. One of them, actually, of the three people, actually had a Pulitzer Prize. So what they did was they wrote this story that tied Trump officials with a Russian bank. And anyway, so here, he'll break it down. Three prominent CNN journalists resigned Monday night after the network was forced to retract and apologize for a story linking Trump ally Anthony Scaramucci to a Russian investment fund under congressional investigation. The article, like so much Russia reporting from the U.S. media, was based on a single anonymous source, and now the network cannot vouch for the accuracy of its central claims. Several factors compound CNN's embarrassment here. To begin with, CNN's story was first debunked by an article in Sputnik News. Isn't that sweet? That's just extra sweet. The Russians debunked CNN's bullshit story about Russia. Was first debunked by an article in Sputnik News, which explained that the investment fund documented several factual inaccuracies in the report, including that the fund is not even part of the Russian bank, Bank, that is under investigation. Not even part of that bank. So they got the whole fact wrong, the whole base of the story. And Breitbart.com also debunked them.
Yeah, that's super sweet, too.
Breitbart.com debunked them.
Yeah. Yeah, when Breitbart can call you out on your bullshit and be right, you've got issues.
You're doing something wrong. You know, in 2012, Jeff Zucker, the president of CNN, said he wanted to, quote, broaden the definition of what news is. What he didn't tell us was that fact-checking was on the chopping block. Wow. The corporate media, this joke works in several videos. The corporate media is so shitty that they can make a racist snake oil salesman, billionaire, reality TV star look like a victim. Wow. Oh, by the way, you want to see that? There's the Sputnik News story that debunks CNN. That's just the cover. There it is. Russian investment fund denies CNN report of U.S. sanction regime violations. And then there's the editor's note from CNN. And what does it say? I'll read it to you. God damn it, I'll read it to you. It says, on June 22nd, 2017, CNN.com published a story connecting Anthony Scaramucci with investigations into the Russian Direct Investment Fund. That's the RDIF. The story did not meet CNN's editorial standards, meaning it was complete bullshit. The story was complete bullshit. I like how they say it, though. It didn't meet our standards.
Jimmy, why did you tell me that story last night that you were caught in traffic last night?
When I was actually out drinking?
Yeah, when you were actually out drinking.
Well, you know what, Steph? That story does not meet my editorial standards. Meaning it was a lie. It does not meet my editorials. It was complete bullshit, that story.
And he's now retracted it. So
and I'm going to retract it.
You guys are fine.
So we're fine.
Please retract it in small print, though.
Okay. Yeah, right? The story did not meet CNN's editorial standards and has been retracted. Links to the story have been disabled. CNN apologizes to Mr. Scaramucci. CNN is apologizing to a guy named Scaramucci.
No, I wish I could have been like in the board when they decided to publish that article in the first place with the three of them. Like, hey, who's our source? It's anonymous. Is that going to be a problem? No, fuck it. The guy has an Italian last name. We'll be good.
So back to Glenn Greenwald's article, he says, and this episode follows an embarrassing correction CNN was forced to issue earlier this month when several of its highest profile on-air personalities asserted, based on anonymous sources, that James Comey in his congressional testimony was going to deny Trump's claim that the FBI director assured him he was not the target of any investigation. In fact, here's the headline from that article that they had to correct. CNN issues correction after Comey's statements contradicts. So they had been reporting. So Trump had said publicly that Comey told Trump, I'm not under investigation. Remember Trump said that? CNN starts reporting that's a lie. Comey's going to contradict Trump. He's going to say well, here's what they said. The CNN report said Comey was expected to dispute President Trump's claims that Comey said he was not under investigation on multiple occasions. The report titled Comey expected to refute Trump, that was what it was called, was based on unnamed sources and said Comey's conversations with the president were, quote, were much more nuanced, end quote, and that Trump drew the wrong conclusions. The story was compiled by 4 CNN journalists, including Gloria Borger, Eric Lichtblau, Jake Tapper, and Brian Rokas. Borger reiterated the report's claims in an appearance on CNN on Tuesday. So they kept pushing the story. He went on air and said this: Comey is going to dispute the president on this point if he is asked about it by senators, and we have to assume that he will be, said Borger, the network's chief political analyst. He will say he never assured Donald Trump that he was not under investigation, that would have been improper for him to do so. Turns out that was all bullshit. That their network's chief political analyst was completely bullshitting. Was 100% incorrect. In fact, CNN had to do this. An earlier version of this story said that Comey would dispute Trump's interpretation of their conversations, but based on his prepared remarks, Comey outlines 3 conversations with the president in which he told Trump he was not personally under investigation.
And why did they keep overhyping it? They kept overhyping it because that was potentially going to be a gotcha situation for Trump if that would have been true. Because, well, if Trump fired this guy knowing that he was under investigation, that's something he couldn't do. So they kept hyping it because that's going to be the gotcha moment. That's going to be the gotcha moment. That's going to be, nope, just kidding. But our ratings are still there.
Yeah, but their ratings did very well, I'm sure. So they amp it up, hype it up. Turns out that's nothing, and then they're like, oh, well, whatever. I wonder why those people got fired this time. I wonder, don't you?
Yeah, I do, yeah.
I wonder why they fired those 3 guys, Thomas Frank. So their story was 100% wrong. They pushed it on the air and in print. And Glenn Greenwald goes on to say, perhaps the most significant Russia falsehood came from CrowdStrike. So he's listing all the false stories that the mainstream press has been running on Russia and Trump. He lists them. I don't have time to go through.
Yeah, they're really long. We should mention it's a great article. I went through the whole thing.
A list of articles as long as my arm. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's it. I mean, I was just going to say it's a very long list. And I think the main culprit, I didn't keep an actual tally. I thought about it, but I didn't. But Washington Post had a lot of mentions.
Yes, a lot of mentions.
Washington Post.
A lot of mentions in Washington Post. Thank God they suck. Thank God the Washington Post sucks. Says perhaps the most significant Russia falsehood came from CrowdStrike. Now, if you remember who CrowdStrike is, the DNC never allowed the FBI to look at their servers. Remember they said Russia hacked their servers? Remember? DNC did not allow the FBI to inspect their servers. They let CrowdStrike do it. They paid someone to do it. And what kind of information do you think that CrowdStrike's going to give you? When you pay them for the information you want, they give you the information you want. And they did. They said it was Russia, although there's no proof. And they wouldn't let the FBI inspect their servers. So we got to take their word for it. Well, here's that CrowdStrike. Perhaps the most significant Russia falsehood came from CrowdStrike, the firm hired by the DNC to investigate the hack of its email servers. Again, in the same time period, December 2016, the firm issued a new report accusing Russian hackers of nefarious activities involving the Ukrainian army, which numerous outlets, including, of course, the Washington Post, uncritically hyped. Here's what the Post printed. A cybersecurity firm has uncovered strong proof of the tie between the group that hacked the Democratic National Committee and Russia's military intelligence arm, the primary agency behind the Kremlin's interference in the 2016 election, the Washington Post claimed. The firm CrowdStrike linked malware used in the DNC intrusion to malware used to hack and track an Android phone app used by the Ukrainian army in its battle against pro-Russia separatists in eastern Ukraine from late 2014 through 2016. Yet the story fell apart. In March, the firm, revised and retracted statements it used to buttress claims of Russian hacking during last year's American presidential election campaign, end quote. After several experts questioned its claims, and CrowdStrike walked back key parts of its Ukraine report. So this whole bullshit Russia story comes down to somebody that the DNC hired. DNC, proven liars and cheaters. All of them. Then hired this firm to tell you it was Russia. They did. Turns out they're full of shit. Turns out they're completely discredited, like I told you before. So he says, in sum, anything is fair. So Glenn Greenwald, again, a very long article. He does a great job of detailing all the fake stories, all the fake news the mainstream press keeps printing. And that's why Trump gets to call them fake news. Because when they keep being fake news, it bolsters Trump up and he's right. Which is why Jake Tapper tweeted out, hey, Trump's right about this yesterday. Remember, he tweeted about this very thing. In sum, anything is fair game when it comes to circulating accusations about official U.S. adversaries, no matter how baseless, and Russia currently occupies that role. More generally, the less standing and power one has in official Washington, the more acceptable it is in the U.S. media circles to publish false claims about them. As this recent shockingly falsehood-ridden New York Times article about RT host Lee Camp illustrates, it too now contains multiple corrections. I got to do a story on that. That's amazing what they did to Lee Camp. Much worse than what the Washington Post did to me. They actually went after him. Dave Weigel just tried to bullshitly shoehorn me into a bullshit piece where he was using DNC talking points to try to make a case. And it was what a bullshit article that was. People respect Dave Weigel. It's like people, like in general, people are like, oh, Dave Weigel's a fucking hack. Just like all these motherfuckers, they're all motherfucking hacks. They all are, because they'll all push a story for money. If their editor tells them to do it, they do it. Jeff Zucker tells people at CNN, start talking about Russia, stop talking about climate change. They do it. Jeff Bezos has already admitted he's told the people at Washington Post how to cover presidential candidates. He's already admitted it. And that's a guy with a $600 million deal with the CIA, twice as much as the goddamn Post is worth. Who do you think he cares more about? His deal with the CIA or his fucking Post? So there you go. And again, here's how they report. Here's CNN. Intel analyst shows Putin approved election hacking. And then right way at the bottom, it says, but neither of these sources said they knew of a specific intelligence that directly ties Putin to the attack. That's how CNN reports. That's how bad the mainstream news media is. They're horrible. That's why we have Trump. That's why. Anything, you guys? So there's a lot of information here. I know we're throwing a lot at you. But just so you know, another completely fake story about Russia and Trump. And now they're finally firing people over it. Isn't that weird? People got fired. That's the weird thing to me.
I do think it's weird, and the only thing I can come up with as to why is that the public is finally expressing some significant wariness over this whole thing. Because the corporate media, as long as there's clickbait to be had, they're going to keep going with this. So as long as there's still, defense people out there that'll say, oh, yeah, but it might be this, it might be this, it might be this, they're going to keep going with this because they can do the whole breaking news syndrome where people are going to click, people aren't going to change the dial because they think they might have finally found something. Same thing CNN did with Flight MH370.
Remember that? Flight MH370. Breaking news.
Breaking news.
Breaking news for about 7 days on that. Maybe 2 weeks. I don't know how long they covered that story, but it was forever.
It was forever. And they would just pan to 4 people playing with a model airplane, speculating where it could have landed. It's the same formula here.
I think what's horrible and what's most disturbing about all of this is when we keep hearing them talk about it being a business. The news business.
Yep.
And that's all it comes down to. This is all business, and where's your profit margin?
Yeah, it's a conflict of interest, and this is a first-hand prime example as to why.
And you wonder why people get their news from YouTube. Hey, the next live Jimmy Dore show is July 17th. That's right, July 17th. That's a Monday in Burbank, California. Get your tickets right down here or go to jimmydorecomedy.com. July 17th, Burbank, California, live Jimmy Dore show.